Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving straight into an extraordinary and incredibly tactile journey into the everyday past. We're going to explore a truly fundamental aspect of human existence through the fascinating and sometimes shocking lens of sanitation. We usually look at history through the grand sweep of wars and empires, right? But to really inhabit another time, we need to look at how ordinary people handled their daily routines and the absolute physical constraints of their worlds.
Which brings us to a profound, inescapable historical question. How exactly did our ancestors navigate this daily biological reality? Long before the luxury of modern plumbing, indoor water pressure, and mass-produced toilet paper, human beings were bound by the harsh, raw realities of their environments. This wasn't just a matter of convenience for them. It was a daily, high-stakes negotiation with nature, disease, and survival.
So let's start with Section 1, the universal human imperative.
Moving right along to Section 2, stones, shards, and sponges.
Okay, let's dive into this. Before industrialization, personal hygiene materials were completely dictated by strict ecological constraints. Basically, they needed three things: absorbency, a somewhat non-abrasive texture, and local availability. People literally used whatever the landscape and their social standing provided them. Now, looking at the classical Mediterranean, the ancient Greeks favored a highly abrasive, individualistic method. They relied on things called pessoi and ostraca, which are essentially smooth stones and recut terracotta shards, to literally scrape themselves clean. And while they did sometimes recut old ceramics to minimize sharp angles, forensic analyses show this practice came with severe physical risks. We're talking cutaneous abrasions, mucosal damage, and the painful exacerbation of hemorrhoids.
This fierce frugal individualism is perfectly captured by a real ancient Greek proverb. 3 stones are enough to wipe one's arse. But here is where the material evidence gets truly fascinating. Archaeologists have actually discovered these wiping shards inscribed with the names of prominent figures, guys like Socrates, Themistocles, and Pericles. So these weren't just hygienic tools, they were instruments of political vengeance. Wiping with an enemy's name was a highly symbolic act, allowing a citizen to literally soil the legacy of their adversary. Now that is a level of petty you just have to marvel at.
Now let's contrast that highly individual Greek method with the Roman approach. Over in the bustling public bathhouses of the Roman Empire, citizens used the terrasorium, or zillospongium. Basically, it was a natural Mediterranean sea sponge affixed to a wooden rod. These devices were kept right there in the communal latrines, stored in channels of running water or in buckets brimming with salt water and vinegar.
Now, what's really interesting about this comparison is the stark contrast it presents regarding human health. On one side, you have the physical trauma and individual spite of the Greek shards. On the other, we face the absolute epidemiological horror of the shared Roman sponge. Because the trosorium was reused by hundreds of different patrons, it became a massive vector for infectious diseases. We're talking dysentery, cholera, and all sorts of intestinal parasites spreading like wildfire.
To really grasp the dark sensory reality of these Roman latrines, consider this grim primary source from the philosopher Seneca the Younger. He wrote that a Germanic gladiator actually died by suicide by hiding in a latrine and pushing the wooden stick deep into his throat. It is a shocking, visceral reminder of the desperate constraints shaping human choices in the ancient world.
Which brings us to Section 3, spatulas of the Silk Road.
Leaving the Mediterranean behind, let's shift our focus eastward along the arid, wind-swept Silk Road. At the edge of the unforgiving Taklamakan Desert in China, specifically at the Shanquanji military outpost, archaeologists unearthed something called the Su-Cho. Dating back over 2,000 years to the Han Dynasty, these were purpose-built hygiene sticks. They were essentially flattened bamboo or wooden spatulas, systematically crafted and sanded smooth to prevent splinters, and then wrapped in a layer of cloth at one end. We know they were used by government officials, soldiers, and merchants traversing these great trade routes.
But the true historical treasure here wasn't just the design of the sticks themselves, it was what was left on them. Microscopic analysis of the preserved fecal traces, which amazingly survived millennia in that dry desert air, revealed eggs from multiple parasites. We're talking roundworm, whipworm, tapeworm, and the Chinese liver fluke.
Now, the macro-historical relevance of this data is absolutely monumental. You see, the Chinese liver fluke requires wet, marshy environments to survive, yet it was found in a latrine bordering a desert, literally 1,500 kilometers away from its natural habitat. This provides robust, irrefutable proof that travelers along the Silk Road weren't just trading silk and spices, they were actively responsible for spreading infectious diseases across entirely different continents.
Let's move to Section 4 and see how this builds: nature, cloth, and class.
Moving into medieval and early modern times, everyday existence was profoundly shaped by geography, climate, and sharp social divides. During this era, socioeconomic status entirely dictated your comfort and health. While monarchs and wealthy patricians enjoyed extremely soft, fine wool or linens with silk borders, the rural peasantry had to rely on the wild forest. An aristocrat faced minimal physical risk, but a commoner, using rougher materials like moss, leaves, or hay, had to rely heavily on local botanical safety just to avoid severe irritation.
Honestly, for the vast majority of human history, ordinary people survived using whatever agricultural waste or natural flora was right at hand. In the ancient salt mines of Austria, miners used the butterbur leaf. It's a plant so deeply associated with this act that it's still colloquially known in Bavaria today as Arschwurzen or butt roots. Later on, in colonial America, settlers repurposed dried pitted corncobs, or they gathered the large, soft leaves of the mullein plant, which they affectionately dubbed cowboy toilet paper. We even see this deeply tactile reality reflected in the literature of the time. The 16th century French writer François Rabelais injected a brilliant touch of scholarly humor into his satirical work Gargantua. In a famous chapter where the young giant systematically tests dozens of wiping methods, from velvet earmuffs to a stray cat, Gargantua ultimately concludes, "There is no such torchcool as a well-downed goose, provided you hold its head between your legs." It's a hilarious, highly sensory critique of elite luxury versus raw, natural warmth.
And that brings us to our final chapter, Section 5, the Modern Sanitation Revolution. The Industrial Revolution came along and commodified our most intimate biological acts, fundamentally altering human epidemiology forever. And the chronological evolution of paper hygiene is actually pretty astounding. While its use was first recorded in China around 589 AD, and the Ming Dynasty was mass-producing a staggering 700,000 sheets a year for the imperial court by the 14th century, the West was lagging far, far behind. In fact, it wasn't until 1857 that Joseph Getty introduced commercial, flat sheets of medicated paper in America. And it took until 1891 for Seth Wheeler to patent the standardized, perforated roll we all know today, a design that finally helped overcome Western cultural squeamishness regarding sanitation.
Yet, early commercial paper had a rather startling technological constraint. The manufacturing processes back then simply couldn't completely remove wood chips. That meant early users literally had to endure tiny wooden splinters in their toilet paper. Imagine that. It wasn't until 1935 that the Northern Tissue Company launched a splinter-free brand. And not until 1942 when St. Andrew's Paper Mill in England finally invented the ultimate modern luxury, two-ply softness. Today, we take this soft, splinter-free luxury entirely for granted. But as we reflect on the moss, the inscribed ceramic shards, the communal sponges, and the silk-wrapped bamboo of our past, it really makes you wonder, have we truly perfected sanitation, or is disposable paper just a brief, ecologically costly chapter in our long human history? As environmental concerns push us back towards sustainable alternatives, you have to ask yourself what historians 2,000 years from now will think of our modern methods. Thank you for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking questions and keep exploring the past.